All right, so now what we're going to do is add in a custom model manager and a custom query set. Both of these things are really useful for filtering down our data and not repeating ourselves too much. Like this right here. I want to make this a little bit more simple. So to do this, I'm going to go ahead and create a model manager. So come in here and say class video manager, and this is models.manager. And then we're going to define a get query set method here. And it's going to return, well, we'll talk about that in a second. And then I'm also going to define class video query set, and it's models.query set. And here I'm going to define something called published, right? So it takes in self, and this is going to return self.filter that query set that we did in our test. Right, so all of this, which I just copied and pasted. And of course, that filter is exactly what we did already, which is video objects.filter. So we just called roughly the same thing, but now it's just the arguments that we have. Okay, so these arguments are the only arguments that I want in there. Cut that out. And there we go. Okay, looks kind of funny. There we go. So now I definitely need now inside of this publish as well, which I already imported time zone, so timezone.now. Okay, so now I've got this query set that I could potentially use. So I'm going to go ahead and use in here that query set with self.model and using self._db. Okay, self.model being the actual model class itself, so we can actually run those filters. And then self._db means using our current database, which is in our settings.py. So this actually gives me access to that query set. So now back into my tests, what I can do is instead of calling this whole thing, well, I can go ahead and use the model manager, which in this case, I'm going to go ahead and say test the publish manager, and we'll go ahead and run roughly that same thing. But this time the publish query set will be .all and .published. And again, we want to assert that that even exists based off of our setup cases. Okay, so now that we've made changes to models and the tests themselves, there is one more thing I need to do in my models actually, which is grabbing this manager and coming down here and declaring objects equaling to that manager. So again, we have our video.objects.all. So video is our model class. Objects is our default model manager, which is inheriting from models.manager by default. We are just kind of overriding it or augmenting it by adding in our own query set. And the fact that we are also using models.query set means that we're actually using all of the same query set managers as well. So we have only just added something which was published. Now, if I called this all, then I would have changed the default features that Django has. Instead, I want it to be called published, so I'm not changing any of the defaults. I'm not actually doing something like that. So let's go ahead and run python manage.py make migrations, and then python manage.py migrate, and python manage.py test. The fun commands. Okay, cool. So all of them worked. That's great. So that means that my query set manager right here is working as intended. So what's also often is you'll come in here and also call published, and then return self.getQuerySet.published. Okay, so these are named the same, but they function just slightly different, which we can see in the shell. Or actually, let's see it in our test. We haven't done the shell much yet. So in here, I can also say, let's just do publish QS and 2. Now instead of using .all, I can call directly published, and now I can go ahead and say self.assert true that, or rather assert equal that the published query set, the first one, .count is equal to the second one. Okay, and we can run that test again, and sure enough, it works. Cool. So now we have our manager tested, we have our manager working, we have our custom query set tested and working. So we're pretty good as far as how we can actually go about using a lot of this data. Now what I want to do is actually remove this from overriding the save method and move it into a signal. But before I go, what you might be questioning or wondering is, do my proxies actually have that same data? Well, yes, they do. And in this case, I actually don't need to change them at all because these were really just for the admin. If I had other methods and I was using these proxies in different ways, then yes, I would want to test them. But these are pretty blank proxies. There's not really much going on other than changing the verbose name, really, and also allowing for some admin type things. But now what we want to do is actually take a look at signals.